Hello, can you hear me? Okay, just check if the slides, perfect. Again, my name is Matteo. I work in Stake Capital for the Herd Studio, which is a new entity, along with Rect, creating content and some designs. I'm also co-organizer, as Josef was saying, of Spaghetti. And I have started this idea called DeFi the Police with a first talk that I gave last year at ETH Prague. So please give a big applause to ETH Prague people and Duct Tape Production for always putting things together in a very, very nice way. And since then, I'm kind of updating this talk with a sort of open source feeling with people who want to join this research independent effort. So why decentralization? Short recap. We need definitely more inclusive and transparent financial system. We know that we want to free the economy and the system of measurement of value from centrally governed currencies. Also, this is something that didn't touch only crypto, but along with crypto, we saw in 2008 the rise of local currencies. So very analog currencies. In France, there were like 120 currencies by 2010. So the 2008 crisis triggered many, many different movements. We definitely need decentralization for a more democratic and redistributive internet. And also, we need decentralization and decentralized technology to implement public goods out of their systemic obsolescence, heavy bureaucracies, and monopolies. So the question is, security is a public good. Can we afford an obsolescent security public service? The idea of DeFi the Police started with the Black Lives Matter movement. You saw cartels like this in most demonstrations, and actually this movement led to some implementations in some police departments. They tried to defund the police with very bad results. And so the system have been evolving around this idea, and I am proposing here a few verticals. So the objectives of this talk are to start the conversation around what I call the centralized management of violence, which is different from the monopoly of violence. I personally refuse the idea that violence is a marketable commodity. So I would like to stick to the management of violence. We will explore the field and trace some use cases, candidates for decentralized technology, and present some examples. So some disclaimers. There is no derogatory intention. I think that we do need some level of management of violence at a centralized level, but we'll see how that works. And the management of violence is a vast field that changes by country, by the number and diversity of the forces deployed, and local issues. The police in Honduras has different rules of engagement than the police in Milan, for example, okay? And I have based this research on interviews to people working for the Italian military, for the Italian police, and professionals working for NATO. So take it with a grain of salt, but this is all, of course, confidential by the Chatham House rules, information that I retrieved by these interviews. So security forces, a few brief description, they obey, that's what they say, they obey the Constitution, or better, they abide by constitutionally elected representatives, which we know in most countries, they don't have the mandate of electorate. So that means that once you vote for someone and that person gets elected, they have all the right to switch party the very day after. We need security forces. Security forces keep citizens safe from what is called the social alert. I will explain later what it's all about. They are funded by taxation, but again, taxation and funding are brokered by centralized governments. And their financial operations are strictly tied to the monolithic system of command hierarchy. So we need security forces for what? To fight organized crime, to guarantee national and public security, to manage traffic, streets order, to coordinate the population in case of natural catastrophic events or other major force majeure events, and to guarantee infrastructures. We don't need them to declare a state of war against the citizens' will, to use suppressive rules of engagement. ROE here stands for rules of engagement, not return of E. Maybe that's another acronym, sorry. We don't need them to use suppressive rules of engagement on demonstrations. And we don't need them to execute orders against the freedom of speech and press, freedom of movement, identities rights. And we don't need them to seize infrastructures, just like it happens in some Central African countries. When they are close to election time, they just switch the internet off for maybe weeks. And also use surveillance technology against the citizens without a reasonable cause. Security forces need secrecy for investigations, of course, to define targets, to run operations, and for on-field communications. But they also need transparency for the chain of command, who takes what command and who passes on which command and who executes which command, for accountability of that command and execution, for order formulation, and most important, for budgeting and spending, which is very opaque. There are certain bugs in the management of violence. First of all, the centrally determined supply allocation is not efficient. In Italy, for example, this is just an example, the police supplies have 2 seasons, winter and summer, regardless if you live in Sicily or in Tyrol. So if you have to change your equipment in October, in Sicily there might be 35 degrees, in Tyrol there might be 10 degrees. But you have, as a policeman, you have to change and take the summer clothing or winter clothing. And there are doped contracts, the famous 10K toilet being supplied for especially military operations. We know that the war is always a big reconstruction and this sort of camp facilities market. So there are doped contracts, poor qualities of supplies, there are many conflicts of interest, so high hierarchy generals recommending certain firms. And there's also what is called accounting, a problem in the accounting of what is called asset forfeiture. What is that? Asset forfeiture is like when I enter, for example, a drug dealer's place and there are some cash on the table, maybe 10K. I declare 5K and the other 5K I just take, just pocket them with my colleagues. That happened. That happened in the US. That happened in Italy, as long as my research moved on. And centralized communications can be hacked and manipulated. We know that there is a long bureaucracy behind passports, visa, which is mostly due to obsolete bureaucracy, and the social alert. So every government issues what is called the social alert. The social alert is basically a series of KPIs that every police department have to reach in order to get bonuses and further funding. For example, in Italy, in the Carabinieri district of Piacenza, they hacked the current KPI because one of the KPIs was number of arrests of a specific target of people. So they kept arresting and releasing the same person, of the same people over and over again, just raising their score and receiving a lot of funding. That is basically creates a system where the police is more interested, the management of the security is more interested in the responsiveness rather than in the preemptiveness of their policy making and actualization. So that's what many cops told me. We do not have enough incentives to work on preemptive policy making, which was kind of a revelation to me that a cop could say that. There are also some gimmicks in the management of violence. First of all, orders must be executed unless they clearly constitute a crime. But again, this praxis is very unincentivized because you have to go through long bureaucracy, you have to expose yourself as a public officer. That means that you are more likely not to career up in your life. So there are a lot of disincentives. The source of legitimacy of a given officer doesn't always follow the hierarchy. So if as an officer, you are in charge of a specific premise or action, you can outrule a higher rank if you are, the direct in command for that. The rules of engagement for the police are mostly established at local level, which is usually more flexible, like the town hall and region, which is usually more flexible than the central government. And in certain cases, by locally governing institutions. Like, for example, in stadiums, is the FIFA that says what the police can have and cannot have. For example, in stadiums, FIFA clearly says cops should not have tear gas. So whenever tear gas happen, those cops incur into trials because the rules has been set by FIFA and not by the local government. We also have more measurable than before because we moved away from the old paradigm of military objectives equal deaths per mile. So we also, if you look at YouTube, we have more and more channels of police departments or military camps where they do memes while running, etc. So there is a strategy to get the security forces more public friendly. And also, this goes within what NATO established as the PSYOPS conference in Tampa in 2016 as an attempt to implement more social networks adoption from the security forces side. There are already some intersections between security forces and blockchains that are exploring, of course, audit spending, supply chain tracking for components, a decentralized database for passports that happened already in Dubai with a partnership by Hyperledger. There is, again, on Hyperledger, a project run by the Department of State. DARPA stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Basically, they are looking into forward and backward secrecy for messaging, live self-deleting messages, one-time eye-only messages, and resilience against cyber attacks. And again, NATO is pushing a lot towards this innovation challenge to operationalize the use of social media and use blockchain-powered procurement in their operations. We move into proposals, and I would like to start this part with, with this sentence by Norberto Bobbio. Norberto Bobbio is one of the greatest political philosophers of our time. He said that a democratic country is mature when the armed forces are perfectly integrated in the civil society. So let's see what... This is a first proposal that I found by Kixonil and Spector, already dated 7 years ago. 8 years ago. It's about neighborhood security. So basically, it's a peer-to-peer business relationship between the customers, meaning the tenant, the people living in a given neighborhood, and the patrolling guards. So there is an individual relationship between the householder and the patrolling guard. The customer, the tenants, basically confirm their own ID by doing a proof of burn of cryptocurrency. And they receive this RCF, a random coin fountain, which is basically placed by the house, and which is lottery-based. So the more checks it receives from a patrolling guard, the higher the chances that patrolling guards receives a drop, an airdrop. Okay? So it's a random coin fountain. The reputation of the patrolling guards is connected to the tenant, meaning that me as a household, I like this person, he's coming quite often to check up, etc. So I just boost her up, and that will give him, her more chances to win the lottery out of my fountain. And I can also do the opposite. There's also a call for help broadcast that basically all of a sudden boosts up my random coin fountain possibility, so I have all the guards coming to my house to check what's happening in case I'm afraid someone is breaking. Okay, the problem here is that this system is a lucrative model that basically encourages gated communities to become even more gated. So if you don't have the way to incentivize people to go and check your houses, you're basically left in the wilderness of criminality. The one proposal that I'm kind of very softly carrying on is to work on that definition of KPIs. So the idea that, of course, it's an open source idea, and you're welcome to join a Telegram group later to propose what you think is a good way through, is basically that the public administration could issue SBTs based on an advancement of what is called the indivisible taxes, the TIS. The TIS in Italy, for example, are those taxes that you pay for streets cleaning, for light, and for the police, for security. So by advancing your next term taxes, you receive this SBT, and that taxes go into a matching pool altogether. Citizens can group into delegations, like, for example, NGOs. Who was in Bogota at DevCon? Thank you. Like in Bogota, for example, there are many NGOs working in the streets, taking away kids from street gangs. So they know the reality of crime. They know where crime has its roots in. They can formulate good preemptive policies. So the idea is that we want to empower those NGOs to propose this bottom-up KPI thinking, strategies to prevent crime issues, and citizens can basically vouch their SBTs for a determined strategy. Police stations can basically allocate or stake their officers' IDs to certain strategies, and this delegation can say, okay, this cop is actually doing a good job coming in here every day, working with us, etc. So we boost their reputation up, and that will basically mean more threshold out of the matching pool being destined to that particular department, police department. Yeah, so basically these funds are split among strategies with the best vouching performance. That's basically it, but onboarding the police, am I out of my mind? It's a hard thing. It's even hard to onboard Generation Z. So why the police? But actually, they have been onboarded already by people like this. Hyperverse was a big scam recently happened, and in Italy, they had one of their promoters actually being some people in the army and in the police. So we had a lot of policemen and policewomen scammed by these because the network was in there. So they know what's crypto, they know how to handle wallets. So they got burned, but so I think that many people as well did here in this room at a certain point. And this is the Telegram group if you want to join the conversation, if you have some thinking, if you bump into some news that could be interesting to share. There are some interesting profiles there from different projects in crypto that want to put their thinking in. And I will share these slides on the Telegram group. These are literature, etc. And I would like to end with wishful thinking that we should drop prejudice. There are good cops, there are bad cops, of course. And the only way we can have social peace is through justice. And the only way we can create a better justice system is by working on good administration and good finance. So that's basically my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm very happy to take them.
All right, thank you very much, Matthew. We have time for one, max 2 questions, if there are any questions.
Thanks for the presentation. This was a really interesting perspective that I hadn't thought about as a use case for crypto. But I was thinking a little bit about what you said about the use case for local groups in Bogota, for example, that you talked about, where they can also contribute to the policies and, I guess, different KPIs for the police. And I wonder if this is something that you've already, I don't know, tried to roll out in specific areas, or what do you think could be effective KPIs for police organizations or government violent organizations in, in practice?
Ooh, well, that's actually, I still haven't thought about it, but that's some cops gave me some very interesting answers, and I should go back to the interviews to see those answers. But I remember that those cops were really into providing a system so that there was a sort of like, okay, the judiciary system benefits, for example, for this corrupt KPI system, because the more trials you have, the more lawyers have to be. So there is definitely something that cops told me. So it's not just about the government and the police. There is also like an economic triangle there, the judiciary system, which has also its lobbying, etc., that supports that policy, because that means more work. And so, for example, yeah, I would look into that triangulation in order to maybe achieve the direct line. Sorry if I didn't give you direct answers, but yeah, actually, please suggest something. I mean, and that also depends on the area where you're in. I think if you have to deal with drug problems or gangs or youth gangs, so there are many different problems depending on the area, suburbs, etc. Thank you.